This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
I think because I'm in marketing, I struggle a little bit with the you belong here, a place for everybody. I see the shiny messages and I understand the marketing campaigns, but I don't see the follow through. I see you belong if you believe, but you first have to believe to belong. And I think you belong. And so if I was to reimagine it, I would see a table with a seat for everybody.
I'm Georgia, and welcome to Finding Hope, the podcast that finds the good in the midst of the bad. Each episode, we meet someone who's had a bit of a hard time, but has found hope and healing along the way. And hopefully, they inspire you to embrace the good in your world as well. Episode 28, Susan Sohn. In a world that values appearance, status, and surface-level success, being unapologetically yourself can be a difficult thing, sometimes almost impossible. But Susan Sohn is changing that narrative. She's been on a journey of authenticity for most of her life. She always strives to be her truest, most authentic self. But lots of things can make that difficult. Work, friendships, social media, even church. Luckily, Susan has some fantastic tips on how to be truly authentic, even in life's hardest moments. Let's meet her. Susan Sohn, thank you so much for joining me on the Finding Hope podcast this week. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Thanks for having me, Georgia. I'm looking forward to this as well.
Well, Susan, tell me a little bit about yourself. How would you introduce yourself to a stranger?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. I would say I am Susan Sohn. I am a mother, a wife, and a lover of life. I
love that. What do you do for work, Susan?
I am in marketing. I've had a career in media. So most recently what I'm doing is I run my own digital agency, which was birthed from starting my own brand and figuring out what to do online and how to do it and how to engage with people in meaningful ways. And so I did that with my own brand. And now I run a company called Soma Society, where I get to work with organizations all over the globe and help them do the same.
That's amazing. What are the secrets to engaging well online? I feel like it is a cesspit out there. It's terrifying.
Look, a lot of people spent a lot of time gaining followers and fans and friends and all of that stuff, but forgot about engaging. And so I come into it as an engagement specialist. And what do you do online? To answer your question, you do what you would do in real life. You are authentic and meaningful and add value to people's lives.
What does authenticity mean to you?
Showing up with the beauty of me, which includes the lumps and the bumps, the scratchy bits, the soft bits, and showing up in the world and choosing to be me every day.
Have you always been like that? Or has being authentic it's something you've had to learn? Or was there a time where you realized, all right, this is it, I need to start being authentic?
I like to say that I found my voice of confidence early in life. I remember, and there's a story that I tell. I wrote a book a while ago, and there's a story I tell about my grade 1 teacher called my mom up and asked her to come into school because he needed to shake some of the confidence out of me. Thankfully, I had a mother who knew who she was and wasn't afraid to show up in the world authentically as herself. And I remember the doors of the school flying open and my mom being in my corner and letting my grade 1 teacher know that it would not be his responsibility to shake anything out of me. So I did find my voice of confidence early, which I think aided in being able to be authentic. That being said, I do think that confidence as a teenager, as a young child, could have been misplaced at times, but it has served me well in this sea of authenticity and what that means. And, it's a buzzword now, and it has been for the last couple of years, but I do think that it's something that I have had from an early age.
Yeah, fantastic. I think we'll come back to authenticity because it's
Yeah.
a really great conversation to have. You've lived a jam-packed life. You grew up in the Canadian prairies, which even reading that phrase, I'm like having visions of rolling hills in my head. What was that like? What was that childhood like?
Well, I'd like to say your visions of rolling hills are exact, but the prairies are flat.
Oh,
Flat as a tack. And so I'm really excited. We're going back in July after, 2.5 years of not being able to get home. And I'm looking forward to my kids seeing, it's called The Land of the Living Skies. And so you watch the sunrise and you're able to watch it set. But what was growing up like for me? I grew up in a community of 900 people. And I often think of that John Cougar Mellencamp song, I was born in a small town. I can breathe in a small town. I learned to fear Jesus in that same small town.
Well, I was born in a small town, and I live in a small town.
People let me be just what I want to be. And I really am grateful for my roots. I grew up in a town where everybody came together. We supported one another. And I think a lot of my community building and understanding that the table is a place where everybody comes together, where everybody's welcome. There's always a seat for someone. Look, I may have painted a rosy picture. I'm sure there was times in my childhood like everybody's that weren't great. I grew up on a farm. My siblings were my best friends. I rode my bike 7 kilometers to town if I wanted to get to town. I rode horses. I had a really nice childhood.
I learned to fear Jesus in a small town. It's clear that faith has always been a part of Susan's life, but it took her quite a long time to actually accept Jesus into her own heart.
I grew up in a home where we loved God, where we went to church on Sundays. I had a beautiful, beautiful relationship with my 4-foot-something Nana, who was a beautiful God-fearing woman, tiny but powerful. We went to church every Sunday, but I didn't really ever understand or was maybe taught or wasn't my time to hear the message of salvation or anything like that. So I had this moral compass that I held on to. Through my teens and my 20s, I lived my life. It was sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever you want to call it, whatever we're allowed to say here. And I lived that to the fullest. I moved to Hong Kong when I was 18. And I guess I had my come to Jesus moment after living there for a while and just being confronted with the way I was living and life. And I had a relationship with my sister where she sat me down and through tears and everything, I guess almost brought me to my knees. And so that was kind of my introduction to what a life with Christ could be.
Wow. And what about the moment? Was there a moment where you finally accepted Jesus, or is it more a gradual thing?
There was a moment, but I feel like it was more of a gradual acceptance of something greater than myself. Look, I was zealous for a while. I was, again, probably some misplaced conversations and zeal on my part, carrying the burden of needing to save the world, which now in my 50s, I'm realizing that isn't quite my responsibility or the requirement in my life. And so I think it's been I look at it now and think this relationship and this experience and this beautiful story is unfolding. Have I arrived anywhere? No, but I'm loving the journey.
Susan may not have arrived anywhere, but she sure has a lot of wisdom and life lessons to share. She's written a book called Finding Beauty in Authenticity, and I asked her what readers can get out of the book.
I think the takeaway message from this book is really encouraging people to be comfortable in their skin, to know that you are okay, that you are planned, that you are not a mistake, that there is beauty in showing up in the world as you are and not having to get it all right, to use the right words, to dress the right way, all the things that we think we need to present as, but instead choosing to go, this is me, and making peace with the parts of yourself that maybe aren't the glossy ones or maybe aren't the highlight reels, but making peace with that and showing up anyway and walking in that truth. And I think there's power in that.
But you found showing up authentically harder as time has gone on?
In some ways, yeah, I do. Particularly because as you go through your 20s where you think you know everything. You hit your 30s when you kind of go, ooh, I still think I know everything, but I'm not sure. You hit your 40s when you kind of sit back and go, I literally don't know anything. And then you hit your 50s and you go, I'm in this with everybody, and all this stuff that I thought mattered really doesn't, but you're presenting, so you're growing through that. And I have found, particularly with some of my closer relationships, I've found that being my authentic self a bit challenging because I think people need you to be a certain way for them. And there was a moment for me where I decided I'm no longer going to negotiate myself to be okay for you. I have to be okay for me first and foremost. And so I'm not going to negotiate the parts of me that are uncomfortable for you. And I found that to be quite empowering, but in the same breath, quite difficult because some of those closer relationships still want me to be what they need me to be.
Susan definitely shows up in the world as her most authentic self, but it didn't happen overnight. It's a process, one that she continues to work on daily.
Some people may find this a little bit arrogant, but quite frankly, I like who I am. And so I've got a mirror in my kitchen. I love mirrors. I like looking at myself. I like checking things out. And I walk by that mirror. It's on the way from our lounge room into our kitchen. You pass by this mirror. And I think pretty much every day my family would say that I will stop at that mirror, and they can be anywhere in the house. And I will remind myself, wow, look at you. Look at you. And I'll remind everybody around, have you seen this? Have you actually laid eyes on this and listened and embraced this? I really like me. I really do. And I think when we get to that point where we let it all go, just let it all go and embrace the beauty of us and the simple fact that I have been chosen to be in, I was created for this world, for this time. That's blooming exciting. You, Georgia, we're here together. And in the midst of this, there's such beauty in that. And the beauty is found in the stories and the richness and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that's exciting. So vulnerability and authenticity and all that stuff, I think it's found, yes, in the reminder every day of waking up and letting your feet hit the ground and go, I'm ready, world. I'm here. I'm showing up.
Authenticity isn't something that comes easily. So I asked Susan for some advice on where to begin.
Find someone who has their pom-poms strapped to their wrists and ready to cheer them on. Find someone who is willing to sit with you and find the gold within you, because sometimes it's really hard to see. And sometimes I was praying this morning and I thought, one of our purest prayers sometimes is silence. And sometimes just sitting and listening and being able to help people see that. It's difficult to see it within ourselves. It is very difficult. But find someone who's willing to walk that out with you and show you the beauty that is you.
Look, growing up as a Christian and kind of being in the church, I feel like the church historically hasn't been the best at encouraging authenticity. You know, you kind of have that stereotype of putting on your Sunday best and leaving, your problems in the car park and picking them up after you get home. How do you be your authentic self in that space?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And I've found that to be quite complex at times. There was a time in my early 20s, I used to listen to messages and I always thought, gosh, I have to have this horrible life story to have anything to say, like to give a message or to speak to people. I have to have some sort of dire straits situation. And I couldn't wrestle that up. I couldn't dig it up. I had a happy childhood. I've had a relatively happy life not without the struggles, and I write about those quite openly. And I'm happy to talk about any of them. But I really didn't have that massive, I don't know, moment or thing. And then I kind of dawned on me and I realized that I don't need that. I actually don't need that. What I've got is, I think, for me and my story, it's beautiful. And so I found that a little bit challenging and hard to work through until I kind of realized my story is lovely. And then the other thing that I found quite challenging, because I am a woman in business, I am a strong woman, I found it can be a bit complex when it comes to leadership, because strong women, particularly within the church structure, aren't always celebrated. We're good when people need us and want to draw on our confidence, our ability, or anything like that. So it's almost like at times I felt like I'm a bit of a wave being pulled in and then I'm pushed out. And then I'm pulled in and I'm pushed out. And I found that to be quite frustrating and not a place that I want to be.
If you could reimagine church, what would a reimagined church look like for you, Susan?
I'm a big believer that there was more to the Last Supper than we possibly give credit. And I know there's a lot of credit given to that. So I'm not taking away from any of that story at all. But I do think, and I've always thought it's fascinating, that it was at a table and it was with food. And if you look at early art, when you pull that picture out, it wasn't just the 12 sitting at the table and them in a room. There was children and people and women, and imagine people draped over cushions and everybody sitting there. So for me, if I could reimagine it, I see a table and I see everybody at the table. I think because I'm in marketing, I struggle a little bit with the you belong here, a place for everybody. I see the shiny messages and I understand the marketing campaigns, but I don't see the follow through. I see you belong if you believe, but you first have to believe to belong. And I think you belong. And so if I was to reimagine it, I would see a table with a seat for everybody and enough food to go around and laughter and listening to stories. I think the opportunity to hear from older generations and from people, to hear their stories and let our faith be built from that. I think it's a bit of a ground up situation.
Susan, you said, you haven't had this horrible life story, these big moments, but you said you have had some struggles. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what you've been through?
Well, I've been married for 30 years, so let's start there. I miscarried my first child. I miscarried twins after my second child. There's pain in that. And I actually love talking about that because I think it's an area, particularly for women, that we don't talk about. There's not a day goes by that I don't think about those 3 babies. That was painful. And I remember, and I wrote about it. I remember miscarrying twins, and I miscarried the first one, and the second one hadn't miscarried yet. And I was this full of faith saying to the doctor, maybe, like, what if this one survives? And he just looked at me and said, it's not going to. And I called my sister I was in a terrible state, as you can well imagine. And my sister said something really wise to me. She said, Susan, let it be well with your soul. And those words were I can't even really put language around what those words did to me. But it was healing. And I think about that a lot. And I let a lot be well with my soul. We've had marriage struggles, really hard stuff. You don't stay married for 30 years without walking through some pain and some stuff that you got to sort out. So we have a therapist and we keep him on speed dial. But there's one thing that I've said recently is my husband and I have always had one foot pointed towards each other, pointed towards our family, pointed towards the good things. And so we've walked through and we've come out the other side. I know there's going to be more to face, and I'm ready for that. Raising teenagers, oh my Lord, the mistakes I've made. I cannot tell you. My eldest and I are going to do a few podcasts where I'm going to let her out me in the more bizarre ways I parented and the mistakes I made. But it is what it is. I did what do they say? You do what you know at the time. So those are just a few things that I've had to walk through and still standing.
Susan seemingly talks about grief and her hard experiences with this kind of graceful and natural ease. But it's definitely not an easy thing to talk about for her or for any of us. In fact, humans historically have a really hard time talking about difficult things.
Grief and pain and loss, we're not good at talking about those things. Through COVID, my husband and I and our kids, we've lost both our mothers. We had to watch our mothers pass on FaceTime. We haven't had that ability to grieve as a family or to come together. And those are really painful things to walk through. And I think it's important that we sit in those moments of grief and pain. And we're really good. And even in the church, we're really good at wiping things under the carpet and going, onwards and upwards, and God's got this. And those are great little words, but they don't hold a lot of weight when you're in the midst of that, the depths of your pain. And I think there's beauty in sitting in that and resting in that and acknowledging all of those things and moving through it.
What has pain and grief and loss taught you about God?
God's in it, and God doesn't take those things away. It's not a quick prayer that can seal the deal and all of a sudden you're better. The thing that I have learned about grief and pain is that in those darkest moments, the saddest, the most hurtful, that there is a glimmer of hope somewhere. And it's hard to find at times. It's literally like a scratch through, the dark screen or whatever. And sometimes it's clawing your way to that. And it's one step at a time. It's one foot in front of the other. At times it's one breath next to the other. And it's hard, but I think God doesn't leave us in that place. God is there, but hard to find at times. And actually okay for us to be angry. It's actually okay.
Susan, how has your view of God and the church changed as you've embarked on this journey of authenticity, do you think?
Oh, that's a big question. My view of God and the church, I think we need to let go of structure a little bit. Structure is good. Power structure can be really, really dysfunctional. My view of God has changed a lot in that I'm at a place in my life where I find God in nature. I find God in the beauty of conversation. I find God in the laughter of my kids. I don't need to be in a building raising holy hands or singing songs that I don't really know what they mean. I need to be in the moment and I need to be present. And so my view has changed in that I think that for a while I got caught up in the bells and whistles and the magic of changing the world and all of these things. And I think that we're still able to do that, but on a more micro level. I think the way we change the world is through showing up and through every conversation and through being present to one another and engaging in meaningful ways. So I think my views have changed quite a bit.
Susan, final question. How has this journey of authenticity changed who you are?
I think I've become more settled in myself. I'm more settled, especially in my 50s now. The things that used to rattle me literally don't. I think I've got a button that seems to have been switched off. And you might call that 50s, you might call it menopause, you might call it anything. I don't know. But I feel like a button has switched off and I've literally turned my gaze to something which is more captivating and beautiful, and it's life. And it's me in it. And so I'm excited about every day that I get to live. And I want, authenticity has changed me in a way through me being brave enough to be authentic. I encourage, which is to give courage to others to do the same. And through a lens of seeing beauty in each one of us, however we show up, I think that lends itself to something really special.
Thank you so much to Susan Sohn for sharing her story so beautifully. To read Susan's book or to find out more about her work, that information is in the show notes. And that actually marks the end of season 2 of Finding Hope. Thank you so much to everyone who has listened, sent feedback, and shared it with those that you love. I am truly grateful for each and every one of you, and I'll be back with more stories in just a few weeks. And as always, if you or someone you know has a story of hope to share and you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on the Finding Hope page at hopepodcasts.com.au. For now, I'll leave you with this verse. Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. 1 John chapter 3, verse 18. Catch you next time.
This is a Hope 1032 production. Thanks for listening.